Hey, and thanks for joining me here on ZooTube Wild. I'm Susan, and I'm a keeper here at Zooville, USA. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about enrichment, what it is, and why it's important, not just for us, but for you and your pets too. So animals in the wild are constantly stimulated by their natural environment. They're surrounded by sights and smells and sounds and just the daily challenges trying to survive. But captive wildlife doesn't have any of those challenges. So how do we compensate for that? Because without proper stimulation, both physical and mental, to encourage them to do their natural species behavior, we can cause some negative consequences. And what do I mean by that? I mean things like inactivity, which leads to obesity, or stereotypic abnormal behaviors like constantly pacing or feather plucking, and even several health issues, just to name a few. So that's why we strive to stimulate all of our animals to perform natural behaviors. We want them to be active and engaged, and we do that through enrichment. So that brings us back to, what is enrichment? So basically, it just means providing species-appropriate challenges, opportunities, and stimulation in a way that improves the animal's quality of life. Sounds simple, right? But really, it's not so simple. It can be a lot more challenging than it sounds. But thankfully, today, animal enrichment has really come a long way. And there are so many examples out there that hardworking, dedicated, and caring zookeepers have already come up with over the years, as well as products that have been developed that are now available to help us in our quest to keep our animals mentally and physically healthy, that it is a little easier than it used to be. But this field is still growing, and it's really exciting to be a part of it. So how do we design an enrichment project? Well, it's a bit of reverse engineering, really. Basically, we have to start with the end result we want and work backwards from there. And we have to know, is this something we're doing for fun or for a purpose? What is the behavior or even behaviors that we're trying to change? Are we eliminating the behavior or are we encouraging one? And we have to consider, what time of day is this species that we're working with typically active? Is it diurnal, nocturnal, crepuscular, or cathemeral? For example, we're not going to set up enrichment for the parrots and lemurs in the evening because they're not active at night. They're sleeping. So we want them to do their behaviors throughout the day. But the opposite is true for kinkajous or badgers because they're awake at night. We also need to know, are we creating this enrichment for an individual animal or a group of animals? Are we trying to make an animal that's typically high-strung sleep or take a rest? Do we want a nocturnal animal to be engaged during the day and maybe participate in a training session? Or are we asking a badger to even do anything during torpor? Because that's not going to happen. Unless, of course, we just want the badger to sleep. And that, he's got down pat. Enrichment gives the animals variety. It makes them think. But it also gives them a choice. The choice to participate or not participate. We don't force the participation in any enrichment activity, but we do encourage it, and we do reward it. So what types of enrichment are there? Well, there's basically 5 different categories: social, cognitive, physical habitat, sensory, and food. Who doesn't love food, right? So let's look at some of the different examples of enrichment that we've used over the years and still use today. And one that we use a lot is, yep, you guessed it, feeding enrichment. And we do this in a variety of ways. We can hide food throughout the habitat, where the animal has to use different senses to hunt for it and find it. Or we scatter it around the enclosure and they have to forage for it. Or we can use live food items such as mealworms or crickets, and then they have to chase and capture it. We also offer foods they don't typically get, and something such as a large slab of ribs for the carnivores, where they have to work to get the meat off the bone, is an exciting enrichment. Or we can give them a larger meal than they would normally get on a regular day. That way, they eat a lot in one sitting, and then they have a fast day. Now, before you get upset, remember that large cats, like lions and tigers, are not designed to eat every day. In the wild, they can eat up to 80 pounds in one sitting, and then may go days without eating again. Another type of enrichment we do a lot, and probably more than any other, is cognitive enrichment, which includes toys. And that can be things like boxes, balls, bags, bottles, which can be incorporated into puzzle feeders or toys like you would find at the pet store. This is an area where we've been really fortunate. We've spent the better part of 2.5 decades with several pet toy manufacturers to help test different products. This is also really important to me personally because I have several large English Mastiffs. And honestly, it is just as challenging to find a Mastiff appropriate toy as it is to find a zoo animal appropriate toy. Now, if you have a large dog and you know what I'm talking about, let me know in the comments below. Or if you have a really great toy that's stood up to the test of time, let me know that too. And if you have pictures, all the better. Be sure to share your pictures below. We love pictures. Physical habitat enrichment involves altering the physical elements of the habitat. Now, that may be something as simple as including a tree in the design of the habitat, or adding in limbs for climbing on, or those little outdoor little tykes type toys for resting on or climbing, pools, platforms for lookouts, barrels for dens or hiding spots. And it can also include different types of substrates or ground coverings, like straw or shavings for burrowing in, or sand for digging in, or even blankets for snuggling in. Sensory enrichment involves stimulating the senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So for example, auditory or sound enrichment is the addition of natural or man-made sounds. And that can be things like noisemakers or playing music, because we all know music soothes the savage beast, right? The natural calls made by animals from one enclosure can become an awesome symphony because it triggers a reaction among the other animals in other enclosures. So for example, a lion roaring can start the lemurs calling and the parrots squawking. Isn't that just the best sound in the world? Using scent as an enrichment is a favorite of the animals, and that involves adding natural or artificial scents into the environment. Sometimes it's something that can be sprinkled on or sprayed on to different places throughout the habitat. It can be introduced on something as simple as a mat or a cloth or another toy. We use a variety of scents, including things like perfumes, colognes, spices, animal scents, and even poop from another enclosure. Yup, poop. You'd be surprised by how many animals in the wild roll in poop of other species to mask their own scent, especially predators like big cats. They love to roll in poop. Glad I'm not a big cat, because I know I would not like that. Social enrichment focuses on interactions, and that can be interactions between conspecifics, interspecifics, humans, or even a substitute like a stuffed animal. We try to make sure that all of our animals that would be living in a social group in the wild are living in a social group in captivity. We've always tried to make sure that every animal lives with at least one member of its own species even if it's not typically social in the wild, because we find that in captivity, a playmate of its own type creates a happier, healthier animal. We also have human-animal interactions, and wherever possible, we encourage our keepers to spend time talking to the animals, especially those that we are not physically able to interact with. And we encourage positive reinforcement training, which gives the animals a reason to look forward to being around us. This also enables us to do wellness checks to make sure every day the animals are alive and well. And it allows us to work with them for different behaviors to make veterinary visits easier and less stressful. Enrichment is not limited to one category, and often it crosses into multiple categories. For example, a ball sprayed with a scent is both sensory and cognitive enrichment. Food hidden inside of a box or a puzzle feeder is cognitive, sensory, and food enrichment. It's always good to change things up and keep the animals on their toes. Humans by nature are very anthropomorphic, and we look at animals in captivity and we try to attach human emotion to how we think they are. And people always say, "Oh, I want to see that animal in a bigger habitat." But the reality is, it's not the size that matters as much as how enriched that environment is. Do you have pets at home? Don't you wonder what they do when you're not there? What do you do to keep them stimulated? Hint: enrichment isn't just for zoo animals, you know. Thanks to a little thing called COVID-19, people got to spend more time than ever with their pets in this last year. Pet adoption soared, and even people who avoided getting a pet because they just didn't have the time for one suddenly found they had the time. Lots of it. For fur babies everywhere, COVID-19 was like a blessing. For animal lovers, getting to spend all that time with their furred or feathered or even scaly friends was a silver lining to a very large, dark cloud. But now, after months of undivided attention and devotion to them, we are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. And there's a new normal in our sights where we can go back to working in offices outside the home, and kids can go back to school, and we can start getting back to life. And while that's great news for us, it may have some effects on your non-human family members. Separation anxiety, boredom. So what can you do? Enrichment. Because this is where enrichment really shines. Because keeping our babies physically and mentally healthy is very important. And it's never too late to start. It's great for animals of all ages and all types. We encourage you to check out YouTube, Google, or Pinterest for things you can make at home with stuff you find around your house or at the dollar store to prevent boredom. Using things like the tubes from empty paper towel or toilet paper rolls, empty plastic bottles with dry beans inside, snuffle mats from old t-shirts, empty boxes, or treats hidden inside of a wad of paper stuffed into egg cartons, or making healthy food treats like dehydrated jerky. There's just a ton of ideas out there, waiting for you to discover them. But please, always monitor your pet using a new enrichment, especially the first time they use it. Accidents happen. Heads can get stuck in balls or boxes. Toys can break and become a choking hazard. You can never be too safe. So what do your pets have in common with zoo animals? Enrichment. It benefits them all. And if you want to help us keep our animals' lives enriched, be sure and check out our Amazon wish list. The link will be in the description below. You can also make a donation to our enrichment program, and the link for that will also be below. And lastly, we'll also put a link to some of the products we've used, just in case you want to check them out for your furred or feathered friends. Well, this video has certainly gone on longer than I anticipated. If you've made it this far, we thank you for staying with us. I hope you've learned something along the way. If you have, I've succeeded. I've done my job. Hey, don't forget to smash that like button, click subscribe, and we will see you on the wild side.